Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I'm Ed Henry, in for Tucker tonight and all week. Tonight, President Obama is claiming he would have beaten Donald Trump if he had run for another term. Really? You can bet we'll chew over that in a moment. But first, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu can't wait to get Mr. Obama out the door. Netanyahu says he has, quote, ironclad info showing the president helped craft that UN resolution condemning Israeli settlements. Despite White House efforts to downplay all of this, Netanyahu today unleashed his fury, declaring it was the administration that initiated, stood behind, and coordinated the wording of that resolution. Here's what the prime minister told his cabinet.
Over decades, American administrations and Israeli governments have disagreed about settlements. But we agreed that the Security Council was not the place to resolve this issue. We knew that going there would make negotiations harder and drive peace further away. And as I told John Kerry on Thursday, friends don't take friends to the Security Council. I look forward to working with those friends and with the new administration when it takes office next month.
So why did the president, in the estimation of even liberal publications like the New York Daily News, betray Israel? Here are some blistering comments from a usually loyal Democrat, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz, who sat down with me today on Fox and Friends and revealed an intense private conversation he had with President Obama.
He called me into the Oval Office before the election, and he said to me, Alan, I want your support, and I have to tell you, I will always have Israel's back. I didn't realize what he meant is that he would have his back to stab them in the back, and he just stabbed them in the back. And this will make peace much more difficult to achieve.
Let's bring in John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Good evening, Ambassador. Merry Christmas. And I wonder, do you believe this was President Obama stabbing the prime minister and Israel by extension in the back?
No, I think he was stabbing Israel in the front. I think this was clearly intended to do much more than affect the issue of Israeli settlements. I think when you read the text of the resolution carefully, it's an implicit repeal of the iconic Resolution 242 adopted by the Security Council after the 1967 war, and it constitutes an abandonment of the entire concept of land for peace, because it is an effort to establish Israel's boundaries, and for consequences to flow from that could be very, very damaging for Israel.
So, Ambassador, let's get into those stakes so our viewers can understand, because they hear all these allegations flying around. What practical impact do you think this resolution will actually have that will make Israeli-Palestinian peace even harder than it was a few days ago?
Look, the issue in all of the conflicts that have arisen since Israel's independence in 1948 has been over what to do with the League of Nations Palestine mandate. And 242, the resolution passed in 1967, basically said Israel can take the land that it got then, and then in addition in the 1973 war, and give it back to Arab countries in exchange for peace. That's what land for peace means. But if you don't have the land legitimately, you can't give it back. So this resolution, in effect, is saying, forget the war, forget all the efforts to destroy Israel. Its borders are the 67 lines, except where there's mutual agreement, which is a triviality. That's the same thing the United States and Canada would do over an incidental border dispute. So really, by setting the border, you're saying anything Israel does outside that border that dissatisfies somebody can be the basis for economic sanctions against Israel, the whole boycott, sanctions, disinvestment movement, potentially subject to war crimes prosecution at the International Criminal Court. Israel's got some protection under a Trump administration that can veto any resolution to expand this new resolution or to implement it. But there are countless UN bodies that can proceed on their own. And the real fear I have right now is national sanctions or European Union sanctions leveled against Israel based on the express language of Friday's resolution.
Wow. But I want to press you on that point, though, because those sanctions sound ominous potentially for Israel. But on the other hand, you and other conservatives tend to say that the UN is a toothless tiger, that what they say ends up meaning very little in the long run. So will this really have practical impact? Will the world pay attention to what the UN really does here?
Because of the operative language that says calls on all states in their dealings with Israel to distinguish between the territory of the State of Israel on the one hand and the occupied Palestinian territories on the other. That is the crux of the matter as to which economic sanctions will be leveled against Israel. And you can imagine how it would go. No company shall do business with any Israeli company that does anything in the occupied territories. So the reach of this could be very, very significant. I think the incoming Trump administration has got to make it clear, as Daniel Patrick Moynihan said when he rejected the Zionism is racism resolution, we're never going to accept this. We're going to seek to repeal it. And if we can't repeal it, which is unfortunately probably the most likely outcome, there will be consequences for the 14 countries that voted the wrong way, and for the United Nations system itself, and for the two-state solution, which I think has now reached a well-deserved endpoint.
Wow. And Ambassador, last night there was a menorah lighting ceremony near the White House. Normally this is a very peaceful kind of coming together kind of event. There was a rabbi there who had some tough talk for the administration. Watch.
I know that some of us are so sad at what happens there with regard to Israel. We must remember that the way to counter any darkness, any disappointment, is not with harsh rhetoric, not with anger, but by creating light.
You can hear there that even at this ceremony, they were saying, you know, the administration, this tough rhetoric, this tough stance against Israel, and what was encouraged by other nations there could end up backfiring. And I wonder what you think about that.
Well, I think the consequence of the resolution is going to cause a lot of people in the United States in particular to wake up to the political rhetoric we hear so often in this country. We've got Israel's back, the strongest relationship in the world. You know, unless you're prepared to do something about it, I think that's exposed as hollow rhetoric. So, as I say, I think the two-state solution is now exposed for the failure that it is. I think the overwhelming majority of Americans believe the UN had no place in this affair, that, as we have said, on a bipartisan basis for decades, the parties themselves have to reach agreement. So I think the consequences are going to go well beyond this effort to harm Israel.
Big story tonight, Ambassador. We'll see whether Republicans in Congress follow through on some of these threats to actually take money away from the UN. They've threatened that before and not followed through. We'll see if they do that. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, they have followed through in some cases, so we will see.
Yeah. Thanks, Ambassador. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The president-elect is still working out of his Southern Transition headquarters, his mansion in Palm Beach, Florida. That's where we find Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy. Peter, some action today, some staff intrigue, to say the least, Peter.
A lot going on here in Palm Beach.
Okay, it looks like he had a little difficulty down there in Florida. Obviously, we'll try to get back to Peter in just a moment. It's now less than a month until Inauguration Day, but some people are wondering, will President Obama ever actually leave? This is what the president told David Axelrod for his podcast, The Axe Files.
The majority does buy into the notion of a one America that is tolerant and diverse and open. I'm confident that if I had run again and articulated it, I think I could have mobilized a majority of the American people to rally behind it.
He thinks he could have won. Democratic strategist Jessica Ehrlich joins us tonight from Florida. Jessica, it's good to see you. It almost sounds Trumpian. If I ran again, you would get tired of all this winning. I'm Barack Obama, and I would keep on winning.
Well, I think actually the president has been saying that through the last at least 6 months. I mean, he did have, record-breaking approval ratings, especially in this last term, in this last year as president. And I think he's been very confident and expressed this over and over, as we've seen in the last year, that if he could, run again and be doing it on his own, then things would be very different than they are right now.
But Jessica,
that being said,
yeah.
Is
that confidence or is that
gracious.
Arrogance? Is that confidence or arrogance?
I think it's a little bit of both, but certainly he's, allowed that. He's had 8 years of being president with definitely setting records. He was the first African American elected as president of the United States. I mean, he's done things that, no one else has done, whether you like them or not, and has really been able to achieve quite a bit during his time. And I think, he has, a moment now where he can sort of look back on the last 8 years. And I think also now we're going to see him moving towards what his legacy will be and how he wants to structure that going forward, what things will look like. He's still relatively a young man, and there's a lot ahead of him. So what that looks like, will be interesting to see. But certainly, I think he's going to spend a lot of time sort of protecting his legacy.
Well, Jessica, I listened closely a moment ago when you said if he had been on his own, he could have won. It seemed like you're suggesting, as other Democrats and Republicans have, that Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate, and if only Barack Obama didn't have that tether, if he ran directly against Donald Trump, you think he might have won?
Well, I mean, I think it's a possibility. I don't think that, Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate. I think it was a very difficult time. I think there was a lot of baggage and things where she got, took a lot of hits for it. There are a lot of issues that went into her campaign and why she lost. Certainly, this was an election unlike anything that we have seen, certainly in the last, century. Whether Obama would have been able to beat Donald Trump, there's a good possibility, but who can say how he would have handled the slings and arrows? I mean, there's a lot of animosity between those two men. However, they've really sort of seemed to put that aside. I mean, even Trump has said that during this transition, Obama has been nothing but gracious, that Michelle Obama has been very gracious. They've been very open and helpful to him and his transition team. So, I think now he's just sort of enjoying the glow of, his presidency being over, maybe no more gray hairs in the future.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned that positive transition, and Donald Trump has had a lot of good things to say about both Barack and Michelle Obama. Then you look at what happened at the UN. You look at Barack Obama now in this interview with David Axelrod, his old campaign manager and strategist, saying, look, I probably could have beaten Trump. It's no wonder Donald Trump a short time ago went on Twitter and said, quote, President Obama said that he thinks he would have won against me. He should say that, but I say no way. Jobs leaving, ISIS, O'Care, as in Obamacare, etc. I also find it intriguing. Listen, Barack Obama is now trying to say, look, I wasn't on the ballot. This was about Hillary Clinton, not me. Look what he said actually during the campaign. We checked.
I may not be on the ballot this time, but everything we've done's been on the ballot.
So he said then to voters going to the polls, I'm not on the ballot, but my policies, my agenda, it's on the ballot. He said that both in the 2014 midterms and lost, and he said it in 2016, and Democrats lost, Jessica.
Well, there's a lot of issues that we've had as a party, certainly with a trickle-down, if you will, effect. We've had Obama running at top of the ticket, and we've seen this ever since 2010. We have steadily continued to lose House seats, lose Senate seats, lose state majorities, whether they be in the state houses, Senate seats, and governorships. And it's a real concern for people. There's this sort of lack of translation of, he as a man, as an individual, was really someone who galvanized people. And I think Trump actually is the same way and can safely say that he won basically on that sort of cult of personality, if you will. Whether that affects or helps other Republicans down the ticket, it's yet to be seen. The party itself, I think both political parties are really in a position of change, and how these men both affect them going forward. Donald Trump for Republicans, and will Obama be as engaged in the Democratic Party, and what our future looks like? It's really hard to say. I haven't seen any indications that he's really going to be that active, going forward.
That's right. Jessica Ehrlich, we appreciate you joining us tonight. We'll have to leave it there, but that is a looming question with this interview saying, I could have beaten Trump. Is he really going to leave the stage, Barack Obama? Or I suspect we might be hearing from him in the days ahead. Good. Thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
As we said, the president-elect is still working out of his Southern Transition headquarters. That's where we find Peter Ducey, our correspondent, man on the scene. We worked out the gremlins. We bring you him live. Good to see you, Peter.
Good to see you too, Ed. And over the last couple days, we have seen President Obama say he thinks that he could win a third term if he was allowed to run. And we've also heard a key member of his national security team, Ben Rhodes, come out with a message seemingly directed at the president-elect, where he says, there's only one president at a time. Well, the president-elect pays attention to stuff like that. And we know that because he tweeted just a little while ago to say, President Obama said that he thinks he would have won against me. He should say that, but I say no way. Jobs leaving, ISIS, O'Care, etc. Mr. Trump is also weighing in on that anti-Israel motion that was basically endorsed by the Obama White House that a lot of Israel experts say was basically just a move to make a mess for Mr. Obama's successor. And so Trump's got another tweet. He says this: "The United Nations has such great potential, but right now it's just a club for people to get together, talk, and have a good time. So sad." There was also a surprising staff announcement over the holiday weekend. The communications director for the campaign and the transition, who had just been named at the end of last week to the same important title in the next White House, says he doesn't want the job. Jason Miller put out a statement that he wants to put his family first, explaining that, quote, "This is not the right time to start a new job as demanding as White House communications director. My wife and I are also excited about the arrival of our second daughter in January, and I need to put them in front of my career." The most activity we saw in or around Mar-a-Lago over the weekend was when the Trumps went to church and got a standing ovation from Palm Beach parishioners at a midnight mass. The president-elect and future first lady went to the same church they got married in more than a decade ago. But since it's been quiet around here, things are expected to start picking up again soon, though. We're told there will be staff meetings tomorrow, and then on Wednesday, Mr. Trump is going to have a full schedule down here in Florida as he tries to fill out the rest of his cabinet that still needs an agriculture secretary and a VA secretary. Ed?
A lot of work ahead, unlike those UN guys you were talking about sitting around in a club not doing anything. Peter Ducey's our man who's working hard. We appreciate seeing you tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night, Peter. And now, yes, it's time for Twitter Storm, our nightly forecast of social media's most powerful weather patterns. The Republican National Committee is in the eye of tonight's storm over, of all things, its statement about Christmas. Yes, Christmas, which read in part, quote, "Over 2 millennia ago, a new hope was born into the world, a Savior who would offer the promise of salvation to all mankind. Just as the 3 wise men did on that night, this Christmas heralds a time to celebrate the good news of a new king." An obvious reference, of course, to Donald Trump, the king, right? Wait, it's not? Oh, wait. It's clearly an innocent reference to Jesus Christ. I mean, there's a Christmas carol, isn't there? "Hark the herald angels sing," with that line about, quote, "glory to the newborn king." Oh, right, no biggie, bro. But, of course, the Twitterverse lost it. John Weaver, advisor to John Kasich, we should note, a never-Trumper, tweeted, quote, "Dear RNC, we didn't have a new king. We don't have a new king. What the hell is wrong with you people?" Come on, John. They're not playing Hark the Herald Angels Sing by you this year? Apparently not. Simmer Aluwala said, quote, "The RNC must have Christmas and April Fools confused because they just compared Trump to Jesus and said he was our new king." RNC spokesman Sean Spicer, who's going to be the White House press secretary, later clarified that new king was a reference to Jesus, not Trump. Many on Twitter said they knew that in the first place. Bill Mitchell tweeted, "Anyone criticizing Reince Priebus's new king comment knows nothing about Christianity or Christmas." Mary Stowell said, "It's clear to me that the new king is Jesus, not Trump. What is the matter with you people?" Jay Jammer tweeted, "The left whines 365 days a year, never to take a break, not even on Christmas." And finally, Daniel Sharp said, "I think I'm going to call our new president Donald Jesus Trump just to upset crybaby liberals. Merry Christmas." Now, it's worth noting Hark the Herald Angels Sing has another line about, quote, "peace on earth and mercy mild." I checked it. But sometimes we seem to forget that on social media. That's tonight's Twitter Storm. During the campaign, Democrats charge all kinds of nefarious things about Donald Trump's foundation. He denied that, but this weekend said, okay, fine, let's dissolve it to avoid conflicts. So why are Democrats still mad? Also, Mike Rowe has taken on all types of dirty jobs. But what does he think about the opportunities that are now available in the current U.S. job market, specifically small businesses? Mike Rowe's recent talk with Tucker is coming up next. President-elect Donald Trump announcing plans this weekend to shut down his charitable foundation to avoid conflicts of interest. But some Democrats still not satisfied. New York's Attorney General, a Democrat, says the Trump Foundation is under investigation and can't officially be shut down until that probe is over. And the Democratic National Committee is calling the Trump Foundation announcement, quote, a wilted fig leaf to cover up his remaining conflicts of interest and his pitiful record of charitable giving. Joining us now, Guy Benson, townhall.com political editor, and Emily Shire, political director at The Bustle. Good to see you both. Merry Christmas. Emily, is this a situation where Democrats, no matter what Donald Trump does, just won't be satisfied?
No, I think it's very simple what he needs to do. He needs to divest and put his assets in a blind trust. And until he does that, I think Democrats will keep hammering
But that's
him.
the business side of this, right? What about, let's start with the charitable, and we'll get to your point on that.
Well, so it's not clear how separate the business and the charitable were. He has admitted to self-dealing on IRS forms. The Washington Post reported 2 clear incidences where he used the Trump Foundation to pay off and settle lawsuits against his personal businesses. So it's not so simple to tease those out.
Guy, what do you say?
Well, I think that some of the Washington Post reporting was very good journalism and did raise some serious questions about some of the ethics involved, where that money was coming from and where it was going from the Trump Foundation. I think given all of that murkiness, it's the right thing for Trump to shut this thing down, which he's attempting to do. Now, what the Attorney General, a Democrat here in New York, is saying is, well, not so fast. As long as the investigation is open, the foundation has to remain open. If that's the case, then Trump can basically shutter the place, right? Shut down all activity and say, we'll technically keep it in existence, but for all intents and purposes, it's closed. And it seems like that's what they're doing, which is
So that's what I want to stick to the narrow point, Emily. Then we can talk about the business, but why not let him shut down the foundation? It doesn't mean he's erasing all the files from before. If the Attorney General of New York wants to investigate that for another month, another year, he obviously can do that, has the power to do that. But why not let him say, look, I'm pulling the plug on the foundation?
Well, the Attorney General is doing his job and needs to be able to access everything regarding the foundation. I might also add that it seems pretty clear the Donald Trump Foundation has not actually done much in the way of charitable giving. So what Donald Trump means by shutting it down is also not totally clear when it seems pretty evident that he himself has not made personal contributions and that the foundation has not done much in the way of charity work.
But if it hasn't done much, why are Democrats so exercised about it? That's part of what I don't understand.
I think they're exercised about it because they need to make sure they have everything available to continue their investigation. The investigation started in October, and I think they're also exercised about it because, the wilted fig leaf problem, that this is just one tiny detail in the mountain of conflict of interest concerns. And frankly, it's a distraction. If Donald Trump wants to offer this as a small bone when there's so many other deep conflict of interest concerns about his hotel, about the fact
I'm going to get Guy in here, but again, you're not answering my question about, so Donald Trump has this one issue of the foundation. He says, all right, let me shut that down, and then we'll focus on the business. He's going to have this news conference in the new year. But then you say he shouldn't do that because we still got to figure this other stuff out. Why can't he close one door?
I would imagine he shouldn't officially shut it down until the Attorney General has finished his investigation into it. Again, it's not clear that Donald Trump's foundation is doing a whole lot of good as is, and so when he means shutting it down, what will that exactly entail?
Guy, I get the sense Democrats are, no matter what, Donald Trump does one thing here, another thing pops up here. However, to Emily's point, that's partisan politics. To be fair to Emily, he has business issues he has to deal with and has not dealt with yet. As a Republican, does that concern you?
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, because we were saying all along, conservatives were saying in a case against Hillary Clinton, you can't have a State Department for profit and all this double dealing, and you can't have a presidency for profit either. So I understand the little statement, the cute statement the DNC put out about the wilted fig leaf. As far as the foundation goes, this is the appropriate move from the Trump people. The AG here can do whatever they want, although they turned a blind eye to a lot of the Clinton stuff because he's a Democrat. That being said, the next step is what happens with the businesses and how can he disentangle himself from his business interests? Those are very serious questions. Those should not be partisan questions. We were supposed to hear details this month. It got punted to next month. That's fine. Let's wait and see what the Trump people come up with. I hope it's something like a blind trust. That is appropriate.
So as a conservative, you were being honest that you have concerns, and here's what you think a blind trust will answer that. As someone on the left, do you think that a blind trust will solve this for Donald Trump, or will be a goalpost that keeps moving? Well, that's not good enough. Or is a blind trust good enough?
No, I think that a blind trust would take care of many of the problems. So far, Donald Trump has not shown that he will put it in a true blind trust or that he does not know exactly what a blind trust entails.
All right. Emily, Guy, appreciate you both coming in.
Thanks, Ed.
And President-elect Trump tweets about just about everything, and even nuclear arms. And that has liberals, well, up in arms. But are the tweets really that radioactive? We'll debate it. Fair and Balanced next. We may be used to getting used to seeing it. President-elect Donald Trump making foreign policy announcements and pronouncements on Twitter. But some liberals are warning those tweets could be dangerous, especially the ones about nuclear arms. So will Mr. Trump keep up the tweets when he takes office? Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich had this to say yesterday on Fox News Sunday.
On the tweeting thing, let me just suggest, if I might, we might as well get used to it. This is who he is. It's how he's going to operate, whether it's brilliant or stupid. He beat 16 rivals, then he beat Hillary Clinton, and he beat the elite media. He ain't giving it up.
Do you think it's brilliant or stupid?
I think it's brilliant.
Some arms control experts are issuing dire warnings that Mr. Trump's tweets could help unleash a nuclear catastrophe. But is that a giant overreaction? Dr. Jeffrey Lewis, a nuclear non-proliferation expert, try to say that quickly a few times, at the Middlebury Institute, joins us live. We really appreciate you coming in, especially on a holiday week. Good to see you.
It's fun to be here.
Now, Dr. Lewis, I gather, I've been reading closely, I listened to your podcast, that part of your case rests on the idea that President-elect Trump is rash and jumps to conclusions.
Well, I mean, I don't think he picks his words very carefully. It may be that there is some careful thinking behind some of the things he says, and I will tell you, I think people are often just as rash in interpreting them as he is in issuing them. But yeah, I don't think he's all that careful with language, and that's new territory for a president.
That is new territory, but I want to ask you about that. You say he's not careful with language. You were quoted in the Washington Post saying, quote, "If he recklessly tweets, people could read these things in the worst possible light. Do North Koreans have a plan to use nuclear weapons very early in a conflict? They're not going to wait around. If they think they're going to use nuclear weapons against South Korea and Japan." Aren't you jumping to conclusions a little bit there? I know there's all kinds of studies saying that might be what North Korea does, but you're saying he could tweet and the world could explode.
Well, look, in peacetime, it's fine. I mean, he can make a joke about killing Kim Jong-un, and I don't think anything's going to happen because it's peacetime, right? The scenario that I worry about, or at least one of them, is when there is a crisis, right? And that there is already a situation in place where things are very touch and go. And, you know, Trump has joked about having Kim Jong-un killed. And I just, you know, my experience with the North Koreans is they don't find that at all funny. And if we're in a situation where the North Koreans are looking for a sign that an attack is going to come, they might read that into it. So, you know, I'm not so crazy about the tweets.
They could read that. On the other hand, there are others who think that we overread Kim Jong-un and that he's just a tubby tyrant. And yes, he has nukes and we need to be careful, but his bark is bigger than his bite.
So I think that may also be true, but ultimately that still bothers me because, you know, we're sitting here having this discussion about whether we read them correctly, whether they read us correctly, whether we're overinterpreting Trump's tweets, whether we're underinterpreting them. And I think what that really illustrates, at least to me, is that human beings are fallible. And, you know, in a crisis, if you're not incredibly careful with language, you run the risk of somebody making mistakes. So it's kind of like, doesn't matter who's right, who's wrong, doesn't matter if people are not really hearing what Trump says. And by the way, I think they don't really hear what he says. I think often people misinterpret the tweets. But, you know, at the end of the day, you cause a nuclear war, you can't blame the media for that.
So maybe you just, in the Washington Post, you and others were talking about hypotheticals, because I mentioned I listened to your podcast to do my homework. November 22nd, you said, among other things, quote, "We are probably not all going to die in a nuclear war," that you kind of thought some of this was exaggerated. So I guess my question is, are the critics of Donald Trump exaggerating the threat somewhat? Because you're much more of an expert than I am on all of this. I listened to your podcast on November 22nd, and you suggested some of this may just be hype.
Well, look, we live in an incredibly polarized society, so I have no doubt that some of the people who are reacting are definitely exaggerating things. On the other hand, for those of us who work in the nuclear business, language is a really important thing because people are constantly signaling. And so, you know, for those of us who work in this business, to hear politicians discussing nuclear weapons, it's always pretty terrifying. And then to see someone making what I think are careless word choices is pretty off-putting. I mean, I actually agree with Newt Gingrich. He is who he is. I just wish maybe we could convince him not to tweet about nuclear weapons.
Last question. What do you make then of Donald Trump, what he said throughout the campaign, and he said it now during the transition, that he sees it as a strength that he's unpredictable? That you might find it dangerous, others might find it dangerous, and it may be. I'm not discounting, you're an expert on this, I'm not discounting that. But on the other hand, unpredictability, he says, could be an asset against a dictator like Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, that's a giant debate in the strategic community that we're probably not going to settle on television. I would just say, from my perspective, nuclear weapons are the worst possible threat we could face. And so, while there is some advantage to unpredictability, I like nice, plain, old, boring stability.
Well, one thing we're not getting from Donald Trump, you and I can agree, is plain and boring. And I agree with you that nuclear business is serious business, and we appreciate you treating this subject seriously tonight and coming on.
Great. It was fun to do.
Good to see you, Dr. Lewis. And here's something new. Vladimir Putin may be on a quest to live forever. I'm not making that up. The Russian president toured a pharmaceutical plant in St. Petersburg yesterday, not Florida, Russia, with his Kazakh counterpart. Russian biotech company BioCad is working on anti-aging pills that scientists say could increase life expectancy to 130 years within the next 20 to 30 years or so. BioCad scientists told the leaders they're expecting the first results of youth pill lab tests within a year. Frankly, that can mean only one thing: bare-chested pics of Vlad for decades and decades to come. I apologize for ruining your holiday with those photos. Jobs was one of the big issues on Election Day. The host of Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe, talks to Tucker about why he thinks the race for the White House turned out the way it did. Next. TV host Mike Rowe spends a lot of his time traveling the country, taking a stab at some of the dirtiest jobs around. But when he cleans himself up, he does a lot of great work. A short time ago, Mike sat down to talk with Tucker.
So, Mike Rowe, tell me about Mike Rowe Works, your foundation. What's the point of it?
Well, it kind of evolved like most good things in my life have by accident. It was 2008. Dirty Jobs was like the #1 show on cable, and the economy went upside down. And I wanted to try and do something to help the industries that had allowed my show to prosper. And for me, like the moment was every headline I saw in every national newspaper every day talked about record high unemployment. And everywhere I went on the show, I saw help wanted signs. And so it struck me that there was this other narrative going on in the country. And at the time, 2009, there were 2.3 million available jobs that nobody seemed to want. So I thought it would be a decent legacy for the show to focus on jobs that actually existed, that for whatever reason people weren't excited about pursuing, try and encourage training for those jobs, and reward work ethic where and when I could find it with a scholarship program that dealt in work ethic scholarships.
Interesting. So what kind of jobs are these?
Well, it's the typical technical trade construction jobs. Right now, welding has got to be near the top of the list. The need for welders is shocking. We can't train them fast enough, and the success stories that come back as a result are almost mind-bending. HVAC is big, plumbing is big, electrical is big. So you've got maybe half a dozen traditional trades, but right now it's the traditional business of learning a trade combined with the traditional notion of freelancing and being a jobber. I think that's really for sale, and people don't quite realize it yet, but the traditional model is fading away, and the security blanket that we all grew up assuming was going to be there is fading away. So the real opportunities today, and the ones people never talk about, it's the path that a trade can lead you to vis-a-vis a small business and an entrepreneur.
So back to welding. Give us a sense of the economics of welding. If you're a 25-year-old American who learns how to weld, different kinds of welding, what can you expect to make? Do you have a pretty secure job path ahead of you?
Yeah, look, it's hard to be glib and just tell you. I mean, I can tell you what the statistics say, but the truth is, there's a geographical component. A welder in Newport News is going to do very different than a welder in San Diego, and a welder up in North Dakota right now basically write his or her own ticket. So it kind of depends where you're willing to go. But my foundation has trained kids to weld who have through maybe an 18-month certification program. I heard from one of them not long ago in North Dakota. His family's in Kansas, so he does the commuting thing, and it's not ideal and it's not forever,
right,
but they just paid off their house. They're having their second kid, and he's making 140 grand a year, working when he wants. Yeah, that kid should be on a poster. That guy, you know, in fact, there was an article in the Journal about a year and a half ago called the $100,000 welder, where they profiled people all over the place. And so much of the problem, Tucker, honestly, is just getting the facts out there. People don't know the opportunities exist. The next step is to encourage them as best we can, and then make them heroic, which, frankly, I think they already are.
Well, and that may be part of it. Maybe one of the barriers, really, is the people guiding them in schools at the secondary level are all liberal arts poetry majors, which is nothing wrong with that, but they don't see the dignity in welding, maybe. Is that part of the problem?
It is part of the problem. We're also spoiled in that wonderful way that any advanced society becomes when they flick the switch and the lights come on, and they don't pause for a minute to say, holy crap, I can't believe the lights came on again. It's amazing. You flush the toilet and it goes away. I mean, we're not properly gobsmacked by the reality of the civilization that we live in. Consequently, the people who are on the front lines of those jobs are by and large transparent. And, you know, we certainly saw that on Dirty Jobs. We paid inordinate attention to people who had been categorically ignored for a long time.
Yes.
And honestly, I mean, that's why that show worked. And it's also, in some degree, why I think the election turned out the way it did.
I agree with that.
When you pay attention to big chunks of people who typically are ignored, interesting things happen.
Yeah, in a non-patronizing, non-kind of Margaret Mead and Samoa way, but in kind of a straightforward, tell me what you do way, which you did, I thought, better than anyone. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's always a deeper conversation than you expect when you're talking about HVAC. Thank you.
Dude, do me a favor. Invite me to your studio next time. Every time we talk, I'm in a bar. It's getting weird.
I know. Well, that may say more about your life than mine. Come to the legitimate
or
side,
better
man.
Yet, why don't you come out to a bar next time and we'll do this in person? And I'll get you some sweet iced tea. It's nice.
I've spent so many years in bars I couldn't handle it. But thank you. Thanks for doing that, man. That was great.
Good deal.
See ya.
Yep. See ya.
Wait, I think we finally figured out where Tucker is this week. Anyway, still to come. My colleague in Washington, Rich Edson, is on deck. Did you know he likes to do impersonations? He does, and he's pretty good. He's the subject of tonight's segment we call The Friend Zone.
Oh la la! Oh, king in the castle, king in the castle. Have a chair, I have a chair.
It's time now for the Friend Zone. I played that because one of the kings of our D.C. castle, correspondent Rich Edson, is here. Rich, is there anything else you have in common with Borat?
I'm in your chair right now, so I'm king of the castle right here. It's not every day we get inside jokes on the air in an entire segment.
That's what I love, the whole thing, because you have this, which you and I pass each other in the hall in Washington and say, king of the castle, king of the castle. It's just like one of our
right.
fun movie clips. But the other time, we had a Christmas party a couple of years ago with Eric Cantor. Yeah. He was a House Majority Leader. He was very powerful. I thought it was funny that you do these great impersonations of all kinds of people, including Eric Cantor. He was about 10 feet away and didn't hear you impersonating. I turned to him and said, Mr. Leader, did you know that Rich does a great... And I didn't know that you'd be upset. You got a little upset at me.
Oh, no, I didn't get it. Well, you had just gotten to D.C., and this is, we talked to each other a little bit, but this was the big introduction now, like, oh, hey, Mr. Majority Leader, Edson over here does a great impersonation of you. And, people usually love when you do impersonations of him. But the best part of that whole thing is I did the impersonation, and he was very gracious, and he laughed about it. And then the whole Capitol Hill press corps just starts piling on the guy, like, no, you do this. This is what you do. No, you got to do it like this.
So we have a clip, not of you, but of Eric Cantor. Let's just play this real quick of how he speaks.
Look, obviously we came up short. Look, obviously we came up short. Look, obviously we came up short.
Now, I played that in a loop because we were trying to find a time where he said, look. And so he had that drawl from Richmond. So I'm going to ask you to show our viewers, how did you come up with the Eric Cantor impersonation? Give us a line.
It's just that's the word you have to look, and it's a look. We had look, and that's and then you take it from there.
It's like the trigger almost.
Right. Right, and then you launch into it from there. And I was a reporter in Savannah for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And so, you're just immersed in the Southern accent, and you just kind of adjust it from there for Richmond, the farther you go north.
And so I thought it'd be really fun, and it turned out to be fun, but I think you were just a little concerned that, you cover the man, he's very powerful, and people, as you kind of said tongue-in-cheek, they don't always like impersonations because you're kind of sort of making fun of them.
Right. And then I was worried I wouldn't get invited to next year's holiday party.
Did you
get
invited?
I'm not sure. I don't remember if I was or
you
not.
off the list?
I don't know. I think I might have been. No, he was, cool with it the whole time. But,
so, Rich, at the time you were at the Fox Business Network. You've now come over to Fox News Channel. We're all one big happy family. What do you see as the biggest difference? What's it been like transitioning?
The biggest difference is it's, the type of stories that you cover, right? I mean, you look for a business angle in everything you do when you're covering politics in Washington. You cover spending, you cover taxes. And we still do that here at the News Channel. But, when I find myself covering rides to Milwaukee and Ferguson and interviewing the Secretary of State or doing presidential trips, it's a little bit wider of a net when you're general assignment at the News Channel.
It certainly is, and you do a great job. And I wonder, how do you think Borat would approach an interview with the Secretary of State? Can you give us 10 seconds of that?
I think he would just sit down and he'd let the Secretary of State know he's king of the castle.
Rich, we love you at the Fox
Are we
News.
doing this on air?
This is live right now, Rich.
Okay.
We love
All
your
right.
impersonations. We wish you a Merry Christmas, and this is why you're one of my friends.
You too, buddy.
I only have a couple, but you're one of them.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, buddy. Rich Edson, thanks for entering the Friend Zone. And we'll close things out with what our viewers found in media bias. News abuse is next. And now it's time again for news abuse. We asked you to send us the most egregious examples of media bias and simple dumbness you've seen. First up, this New York Times headline sent in by Dat Conservative on Twitter. The stolen Supreme Court seat, a reference to President Obama's nominee Merrick Garland, who, in fairness, never got a vote. But stolen? Tom C. emailed us this Toronto Star headline, in Trump land, it can only get worse. I mean, really? And finally, Rob S. emailed us this headline from The Verge. Trump's tech summit exposed the rotten heart of Silicon Valley. Wow, not too subtle there. Tomorrow night, mean tweets are back. Send your cruelest to Tucker. Oh, no, to me. At Ed Henry on Twitter. Or email us at Tucker Carlson tonight at foxnews.com. That's about it for tonight. Tune in each night at 7 to the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Also, don't forget to DVR the show if you haven't set that up already. The O'Reilly Factor is up next. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow night.